Be me Femanon 26 have a decent job in marketing, my own apartment. A cat named Sparkles my life is pretty good, by all accounts, except for one glaring, gaping void my dating life is a barren wasteland a desolate expanse of disappointment and microwave dinners for one, and for the longest time, I knew exactly who to blame men. Obviously. My friends and I had it all figured out our weekly wine nights were basically strategy sessions for navigating the baffling, infuriating world of modern men. They're all just lazy, Chloe would say, swirling her rosé. They don't want to put in any effort. They're terrified of commitment, Mia would add, scrolling through Tinder with a look of profound disgust. Man babies, the lot of them. And I'd nod along, sipping my Pinot Grigio, feeling a smug sense of solidarity. We were the good ones, the catches. They were the broken ones, the ones who needed to get their act together. We'd trade stories of our latest dating disasters like war stories, the guy who ghosted after 3 great dates, the guy who only ever wanted to hang out and never take me on a proper date, the guy who talked about his ex the entire time, the guy who expected me to split the bill on a birthday dinner. He'd invited me to. The evidence was overwhelming. Men were the problem. This was my firmly held belief for years. It was comfortable. It was easy. It absolved me of any and all responsibility. My loneliness wasn't my fault. It was a symptom of a broken gender, but then something happened that planted a tiny seed of doubt in my well-manicured garden of blame. My younger brother, Kyle, came to stay with me for a month. Kyle is 22. He's a good kid. Smart, funny, works out. Objectively a catch. One night I'm on the couch, swiping left on a sea of men holding fish. When Kyle comes out of his room, he sees my frustration. "Another bad one?" he asks, grabbing a Gatorade from the fridge. "They're all bad," I sigh dramatically. "No one wants a real relationship anymore. It's exhausting." I expected him to nod in sympathy, to agree that his gender was a lost cause. Instead, he just looked at me, a strange expression on his face. "Can I be honest with you, sis? Of course. It's not that guys don't want relationships," he said, sitting on the armchair opposite me. "It's that a lot of us are starting to think they're not worth the risk." I scoffed. "Risk? What risk? A broken heart? Welcome to the club." "No, not just that," he said, leaning forward. "It's everything. The pressure, the expectations, the feeling that you're one wrong move away from being canceled or, worse, legally screwed." This was not the answer I was expecting. "That's ridiculous," I said. "Don't be so dramatic." He just shook his head. "You should listen to what guys talk about when you're not around." That conversation stuck with me. It was like a crack in the dam of my certainty. So I decided to do something I hadn't done before. I decided to listen. My first lesson came from my coworker, a guy named Jason. Jason is 30, single, and a genuinely nice guy. The kind of guy my friends and I would lament about not being able to find. One day, at lunch, I casually asked him why he wasn't dating. "Honestly," he said after a long pause, "it's a cost-benefit analysis, and right now the cost is just too damn high." I must have looked confused because he elaborated. "Think about it," he said. "First, there's the financial cost. Dating is expensive. Drinks, dinners, activities, it all adds up. And the expectation is still, for the most part, on the guy to pay for the first few dates at least." "I always offer to split," I said defensively. "And that's cool," he said, "but a lot of women don't. And even if you do, there's this unspoken test. If I agree to split, am I seen as cheap? If I insist on paying, am I being a gentleman or am I being patronizing?" He took a bite of his sandwich. "But the financial cost is the least of it. It's the emotional cost that's the real killer." "What do you mean?" "Dating apps are soul-crushing," he said bluntly. "It's a constant beauty pageant where you're judged in a split second. You spend hours crafting a profile, trying to be witty and interesting, and most of the time you get nothing. No matches, no replies. And when you do get a match, you have to be the one to start the conversation. You have to carry the conversation. You have to be clever and funny and engaging, and you're competing with hundreds of other guys in her inbox. It's like a second job. A job where you get rejected 99% of the time and you're paying to do it. And then, if you finally get to the point of a date, he continued, you have to be on the whole time. You have to plan the date, lead the conversation, make sure she's having a good time. You're the entertainer and the host. It's exhausting, he said, echoing my own words from my conversation with my brother. And more often than not, it leads to nothing. You get ghosted, or you get the "I'm not feeling a spark" text. After a while, he concluded, you just start to feel disposable. That word hit me hard, disposable. I'd felt that way too after being ghosted. But I'd never considered that the man on the other side of the screen, the one I was so quick to label as lazy or a jerk, might be feeling the exact same thing. My next lesson came, unexpectedly, from one of Chloe's wine nights. We were in the usual swing of things, complaining about the latest dating atrocity. This time, it was Chloe's turn. She'd been on a date with a guy she'd met on Hinge. It was going so well, she lamented. We were having a great conversation, laughing, and then the bill came. I knew what was coming. He asked to split it, she said, her voice dripping with disdain. On the first date, can you believe the nerve? Mia and I made the appropriate noises of outrage. But this time, with Jason's words still ringing in my ears, I saw it differently. The guy had planned the date. He had presumably paid for his own transportation, his own drinks. He had spent hours of his time and energy. And Chloe was ready to write him off completely because he didn't want to pay for her meal. A meal she had chosen and consumed. Was it really about the money, or was it about a sense of entitlement? I started to notice this pattern everywhere. My friends would complain that men didn't plan elaborate dates anymore. But at the same time, they would openly mock a guy who suggested a simple coffee date, calling him cheap or low effort. They wanted a man who was financially stable, who had his life together. But they would also talk about their rosters of men they were talking to, keeping their options open, never committing to one person until someone better came along. It was a classic double standard. They wanted a man to be a provider, but they also wanted to be independent women who didn't need a man. They wanted a man to be vulnerable and emotionally open, but they would cringe and call a man needy if he showed any sign of insecurity. They wanted a man to be a gentleman, but they would roll their eyes at traditional chivalry, calling it toxic masculinity. I decided to take my investigation a step further. I created a fake profile on a few male-centric forums and subreddits. I became a lurker, a digital fly on the wall in the locker room of the internet, and what I read shocked me. It was a raw, unfiltered torrent of male frustration, fear, and hopelessness. Story after story of men who had been burned in divorces, losing their homes, their savings, their children. Stories of men who had been falsely accused of harassment or assault, their lives ruined by a single allegation, even if it was later proven to be false. Stories of men who felt completely and utterly alone, with no one to turn to for emotional support because they'd been taught their whole lives that real men don't show weakness. They talked about the invisible labor of dating, the mental load of always being the initiator, the planner, the pursuer. They talked about the loneliness of being a man, the pressure to be a rock for everyone else while having no one to lean on themselves. They talked about the feeling of being valued only for what they could provide: money, status, security, and not for who they were as people. They talked about the constant fear of saying or doing the wrong thing, of being misinterpreted, of accidentally crossing a boundary they didn't even know existed. It was a minefield, they said. Dating wasn't fun anymore. It was a high-stakes, high-pressure game with constantly changing rules, and the penalty for losing was catastrophic. Many of them had just opted out. They weren't angry, bitter incels for the most part. They were just tired, defeated. They had decided that the peace and freedom of being single was better than the stress and anxiety of modern dating. They were focusing on their careers, their hobbies, their friendships with other men. They were finding fulfillment in themselves, rather than seeking it from a romantic partner. The final and most painful lesson came from a date of my own. His name was Mark. We met on Bumble. He was 28, a software engineer. He was different from the other guys I'd been talking to. He was articulate, thoughtful. He asked me questions about myself and actually listened to the answers. Our first date was coffee. It was lovely. We talked for 3 hours. Our second date was dinner. He paid despite my offer to split. Our third date was a walk in the park. I was starting to really like him. For the first time in a long time, I was hopeful. But the old habits, the old scripts I had learned from years of wine night conditioning were hard to break. I found myself testing him. I'd intentionally take a long time to reply to his texts to see if he'd double text. I'd be vague about my availability to see if he'd be persistent. I'd bring up past relationship problems to see how he'd react. I was playing games, the same games my friends and I would dissect and analyze for hours. On our fourth date, we were at his apartment. He was making me dinner. We were talking about our families, and he said something that, in my hypervigilant state, I misinterpreted as a criticism of my career choices. It wasn't. He was just trying to understand my job better. But I snapped. "What's that supposed to mean?" I said, my voice sharp. "You think what I do is frivolous?" He looked taken aback. "What? No, not at all. I was just asking." "No, I know what you're implying," I said, standing up. "You're just like all the other guys. You want a woman who has a real job, who makes as much money as you do." It was a ridiculous accusation, and I knew it, but I couldn't stop myself. I was performing a pre-written scene from the play of my dating life. Mark just stared at me, his expression a mixture of confusion and hurt. I don't know where that came from," he said quietly. "I really like you, but it feels like you're looking for a fight. Like you've already decided who I am before I've had a chance to show you." He was right. I had. I had been so busy looking for red flags, for evidence to confirm my pre-existing belief that all men were the problem, that I had completely missed the green flags that were waving right in front of my face. I had taken a good man, a man who was showing up, who was putting in the effort, who was being kind and respectful, and I had pushed him away. I had become the problem. I went home that night and cried. Not just for the loss of a potential relationship, but for the profound, humbling realization of my own foolishness. I thought about my brother Kyle. I thought about Jason and his feeling of being disposable. I thought about the anonymous men on the internet, sharing their stories of pain and frustration. And I realized that for years, I had been looking at the world through a pair of glasses that were tinted with my own biases and assumptions. I had been so focused on the female perspective, on my own hurt and my own struggles, that I had never once stopped to consider that men might be struggling too, in their own ways, for their own reasons. I had demanded empathy, but I had offered none in return. I deleted my dating apps that night. I needed a break, not from dating necessarily, but from myself. From the version of myself that was so cynical, so quick to judge, so unwilling to see the humanity in the people I claimed to want to connect with. I started to focus on myself, not in a "I'm a strong, independent woman who don't need no man" way, but in a genuine, self-reflective way. I started reading books on communication and relationships. I started going to therapy. I started talking to the men in my life, my brother, my father, my male friends and coworkers, not as potential dates, but as people. And I learned so much. I learned that men crave respect and appreciation just as much as women crave love and affection. I learned that many men show their love not through words, but through acts of service, fixing things, providing, protecting. I learned that the pressure on men to be strong and stoic is incredibly damaging, and that they need a safe space to be vulnerable just as much as women do. I learned that for many men, sex is not just about physical release. It's about emotional connection and validation. It's been 6 months since my disastrous date with Mark. I haven't started dating again yet. I'm not sure when I will, but I'm different now. I don't go to Chloe's wine nights anymore. The endless cycle of complaining and man-bashing started to feel toxic. I still believe that there are bad men out there. There are lazy men, manipulative men, abusive men. But I no longer believe that men are the problem. The problem is the game itself. The game that pits us against each other, that teaches us to see the other side as the enemy. The game that is fueled by algorithms designed to keep us single and swiping, by media narratives that thrive on conflict, by our own unprocessed traumas and insecurities. And I've learned that the only way to win is to stop playing. I don't know what the future holds for my love life, but I do know this. The next time I decide to date, I won't be looking for a perfect man. I'll be looking for a partner, an equal, a human being, and I'll be showing up as one too, because I finally understand that the reason so many men aren't dating isn't because they're broken, it's because the system is. And many of them are simply choosing to walk away from a game that's rigged against them. Maybe, just maybe, they're the smart ones.